A tree is dying in this forest right now. Before it dies, it moves its wealth, carbon, sugar, nitrogen, all of it, sent underground through a hidden network. This is not decay, this is liquidation. Scientists call it the wood wide web. But the mechanics are pure Wall Street. Trees extend credit, trees charge interest, trees also default, and trees monopolize. By the end of this video, the forest floor looks different. It becomes a $1 trillion decentralized financial exchange. Underneath every healthy forest lies a fungal web. Mycorrhizal fungi lace themselves into tree roots. In exchange, the fungi harvest sugar from the tree. In return, the fungi mine the soil for nutrients. This is the base transaction, the first trade. But one researcher found something stranger. In the 1990s, ecologist Suzanne Simard ran an experiment. She fed radioactive carbon to a single birch tree. Weeks later, she found that carbon inside a nearby fir. The two trees were different species, not related. Yet carbon had moved between them, underground, unseen. The fungal threads were not just feeding roots. They were routing resources between separate accounts. That routing is not a garden hose. It is a ledger. Every gram of carbon that moves is a transaction, and transactions need a market maker. Not every tree in this network holds equal power. The oldest, largest trees sit at the center. Foresters call them mother trees. A single mother tree can connect to hundreds of seedlings. She sends them carbon before they can photosynthesize enough themselves. She recognizes her own offspring through chemical signals. And she routes more credit to her own kin. This is not charity. This is targeted lending. In finance, we call this a market maker. An institution central enough that its failure breaks the system. Remove the mother tree and seedling survival collapses. Studies show seedling mortality can double without her. That is not an ecosystem. That is contagion risk. The forest, like a market, has a too-big-to-fail problem. The lending in this network also runs on the calendar. In early spring, evergreen conifers still hold stored carbon. Nearby deciduous trees have none. Their leaves are gone. So the evergreens extend a short-term loan through the fungus. Come summer, the deciduous trees leaf out and repay it, with interest in the form of surplus sugar. This is not a one-time gift. It is a credit line. Drawn down in scarcity, repaid the moment cash flow returns. The forest runs its own version of a repo market. But a mother tree's last act is her biggest transfer. When a tree senses its own death approaching, it changes behavior. It dumps carbon into the network at an accelerated rate. It also sends chemical warning signals to its neighbors. Insects incoming, drought stress, disease. Neighboring trees receive the signal and raise their own defenses. This looks generous. It is not entirely generous. A dying tree cannot use its stored carbon ever again. So it liquidates the estate before the assets go to waste. In markets, we call this an orderly wind down. A company facing bankruptcy sells off assets to raise cash. It settles what obligations it can before creditors seize the rest. The forest runs the identical playbook, just slower. And just like markets, the network remembers who paid out. Trees connected to a generous dying neighbor grow faster afterward. Reputation even underground, has measurable value. Not every participant in this exchange plays fair. Some plants have lost their chlorophyll entirely. They cannot photosynthesize. They cannot produce sugar. Yet they remain plugged into the fungal network. They draw carbon out. They contribute nothing back. Botanists call these mycoheterotrophs, ghost plants. In finance, we have a simpler word: free riders. They draw down a credit line they never intend to repay. The network tolerates them as long as the surplus holds. But surplus is not infinite. Every free rider adds drag, and drag compounds, quietly, until conditions turn. There is a darker player still inside this exchange. Some trees inject toxins through the very same fungal threads. Black walnut trees release a chemical called juglone. It travels through shared fungal connections into rival roots. Juglone stunts growth. In high doses, it kills competitors outright. This is not lending. This is market manipulation through the exchange itself. A saboteur using the clearinghouse to poison its rivals. Regulators would call this insider abuse of shared infrastructure. The forest simply calls it survival. The network itself is not immune to systemic failure. Root rot fungi like armillaria can spread through the very same connections. The infrastructure built for trade becomes the infrastructure for collapse. One infected root system can transmit disease to dozens of trees. The same channel that carries credit also carries risk. In finance, we saw this exact structure in 2008. Credit default swaps were meant to distribute risk safely. Instead, they transmitted failure faster than anyone could contain it. Shared infrastructure is never neutral. It amplifies whatever moves through it. Health spreads through it. So does contagion. Here is where the metaphor stops being a metaphor. Plant a single species across 1,000 acres and the network changes. No hub trees, no mixed-age structure, no diverse fungal partners. Just one species, one root system, one shared vulnerability. When disease or drought hits a monoculture plantation, redistribution stops. No mother tree has surplus to send. No neighbor has a buffer. The entire plantation can fail within a single season. This is not a coincidence. This is the law that broke Wall Street in 2008. Banks held nearly identical mortgage debt dressed up as different assets. When one lender failed, the risk was already everywhere at once. Concentrated exposure, no diversification, no lender of last resort. A rainforest survives shocks because its balance sheet is diversified. A monoculture plantation cannot, because it never built a balance sheet. Diversity is not an aesthetic choice. It is risk management. The forest figured this out long before any economist did.